At what point did you start getting attention from colleges?
I started getting attention from colleges my sophomore year. The Going into my junior year, I was a quarterback. I was following in the footsteps of my brother. My brother Mark was 4 years older than me. His junior and senior year, he was the varsity quarterback at Blue Springs High School, and I admired him. I looked up to him. He was polar opposite of me. He was straight laced. Fantastic leader, incredible communicator, the homecoming king, just incredibly popular young man in high school. And I'm like, I'm gonna follow in his footsteps where I wanted to be quarterback, but I was definitely not as straight laced as him. I was a rebel. But I wanted to be quarterback. I entered as a freshman in quarterback. I was freshman C team quarterback. And my sophomore year, I was the varsity starting quarterback. So after my sophomore year at quarterback, the head coach calls me over to practice in the summertime. He calls my dad over from the parking lot. My dad was out in the parking lot in his lawn chair. He calls him over. Mr. Lloyd whistles him over. He comes over and he says, "Look," he says, "Brandon, the superintendent's son's moving in town. He's a quarterback. And Mr. Lloyd, I'm sure you can understand this. I want to keep my job. So I'm going to start him at quarterback." He says, "Brandon, now here's what you can do. You can back him up, or you can pick a different position." So my dad's looking at me like, "What you going to do?" And I said, "All right, I really like Deion Sanders, so I'll play cornerback." Head coach says, "You got it." I said, "Well, Deion Sanders played both ways. So I want to be the receiver." And this is at Blue Springs, and we had a full platoon. We had so many students, athletes. We had a platoon, full offense, full defense. And so I was going to be the first two-way athlete. You got it. And I said, "All right." And I really enjoy kicking and punting. Can I still be the kicker and punter? You got it. Is like anything else?
You're like, "I want to be the head coach."
So it's like, that was the negotiation. And so, that was it. We all shook hands, and I began that summer of going into my junior year as a cornerback and wide receiver. And as we toured around Kansas and Missouri, we went through Illinois, we played in Nebraska in these 7-on-7 tournaments on college campuses. That's when I started getting a bunch of attention. I think my first scholarship came in from Kansas State, then the University of Illinois, and then they really just started rolling in. Back then, the publications were really big, and that was the way to promote. And so that's when all that came in to when I was able to put that all on display. I was able to be more flashy in a skilled position than I would have been if I was only a quarterback. So that's when I started rolling my socks over my shoes so I had a spat. I put on multiple wristbands, right? And so I was like, I had different socks, and I really started separating myself and started to really become an entertainer in high school sports.
That's really interesting. I love how your coach was like, superintendent's son's moving into town. But it seemed like that you made the decision, you decided to pretty much play every position. You went both ways. When the University of Illinois offered you, I guess, why did you pick the University of Illinois? What was it that stood out to you about the university and the football program?
When I was visiting colleges, and this is 98, 99, I was going through the unofficial recruiting trips as a junior in 98. And I mean, this was just glorious big, it was Big 8, Big 12 football. And Michael Bishop in Kansas State, Nebraska, Texas A&M, the University of Missouri. It was awesome football. Texas, it was just great football. And going through that process, my brother, who was 4 years older than me, he was actually the first one in our family to get a football scholarship. So he went Division II. He went to Missouri Southern State College in Joplin, Missouri. And so I was sitting there watching him, as an eighth grader. I was like, dang, it's like if he can do that, I'm like, dude, I can go D1. So that was like the first time where I actually saw someone that close to me enter into the NCAA clearinghouse, taking the ACT. I was going on all the recruiting trips with him, with mom and dad and him. And I was just sitting back there, a fly on the wall, listening and watching the whole process, and imagining what it would be like for me going through that. So when it finally happened to me, what I realized is that when I took trips to the schools, the three official schools that I went to, I went on 4 official trips, but the 3 other than the University of Illinois, I was really focused on the team dynamic and how the players got along with one another. I When I was going through the recruiting process, the athletic director called me in the office. He was like, University of Illinois called us. They talked about 3 of you teachers. They talked to Mr. Barnhart, your principal from elementary school. They talked to me. He's like, I'm just letting you know, this school is really interested in you. So I was like, wow, this school is doing all this background on me. They must really care. So that was the first step. The second one was the coach Greg McMahon, who was recruiting me from the University of Illinois. He would come down and watch my track practices. He would sit in the stands way, way, way up at the top and watch me high jump. And as I was preparing for the state championships, and as I was walking off, he'd stand at the top, he'd whistle down, hello. He's like, and NCAA, following NCAA rules, he wasn't going to interact with me, but he'd wave and let me know he was there. I was like, wow, they really care. So Illinois was just going above and beyond for me, staying within regulations and making me feel like I was wanted. So that was that team dynamic. The third thing was, as a person, I knew I didn't want to go below the Mason-Dixon line. I didn't want anything to do with Southern schools. It was important for me to remain focused on the education aspect. Illinois had a broadcast journalism program that was top 5 in the nation, and all the schools that I was considering all had broadcast journalism programs. When it came down to it, I was considering Northwestern, Syracuse, UCLA, University of Illinois, but when it came down to it, University of Illinois was the selection I made for that team dynamic, for the education process, and then on the official visits, those other 3 schools I went to, in some form or another, the players made racial comments. Now, on the official recruiting trips, they intentionally pair the Black athletes with the Black hosts, the Black recruits with the Black hosts, and the white recruits with the white hosts. Now, just on the surface, it's like, hey, just to reduce any conflict or possible conflict, that makes a lot of sense. And so going on these trips, in some form or another, my host would say to me, man, we don't deal with them racial slurs in reference to white people. We don't deal with them blanks like that. We don't F with them blanks like that. That's not what we do here. And so I'm sitting here like, why would I come to this school if this is the team dynamic? I don't want anything to do with it. And Illinois was the only trip that I went on where, again, same pairings, but when they went to take us out, we hung out with offensive linemen who were predominantly white. We hung out at the fraternity parties. Then they took me to a Black fraternity party on campus. And it was, Illinois had the largest Greek system in America at the time. They had every single Black fraternity and sorority, and Jewish and other fraternities and sororities in America. So it's like I was able to do everything that related to me as an individual, and interact with all the players, regardless of race, at the University of Illinois. So those are all the dynamics that came into play why I selected the University of Illinois.
I love all the intel that you took throughout the recruiting process and really figured out what you like and what's negotiable and what's non-negotiable for you at such a young age. Your parents are both teachers. You leave early. Was there any pushback?
There was tears. There is anger. Yeah, it was. There's 6 college degrees in my family. When I was in college, that was my father's wish, was that all of his children graduate high school. We had 3 options: you either get a job after high school, you can stay home for a little bit, but you got to pay rent. You go to college, or you enter into the military. One of my brothers entered into the military, into the Air Force. The rest of us went to college. There's a PhD in our family, so in our sibling group. So the goal for my father was, you get this higher education. This is what they can't take away from you, and it's not just the piece of paper. It's the discipline. It's the skills that you build along the way of getting that piece of paper that make you fully equipped to enter into the world as a Black man or a Black woman, and make something of yourself. So that was the thinking of that. And so for me, if you can imagine, this young kid from Blue Springs, Missouri, getting a Division I scholarship, that was an anomaly in its own right. But then to take it a step further and say, all right, now I'm going to go to the NFL. It's like, all right, dude, come on. You've pressed your luck. Now this much, you've got this far. Now you think you're going to go to the NFL. I can imagine it just didn't seem realistic. And, but I had already, like I was saying before, like my parents weren't going to teach me how to be a professional athlete. And so I had already found those outside resources to put me on that path, so that they just didn't know. I didn't share that information with them. So by the time I came to them and shared with them, hey, this is my decision, they're like, you're never going to go back. You're never going to finish. And I said, I'm going to go back. I promise. They're like, yeah, right. You're not going to do it. But the point was, my decision was made up. I had already made the decision that I was going to turn pro, and I was just informing them of what I was doing. And I, already had my agent, David Dunn, and he talked to them during the process. They had met with a couple other agents, as I was weighing my options on, and if I was going to do that. And, it ultimately was my decision, just like all my other decisions. So it was just more the way that that was their parenting style, was, when I was selecting my college, this is your decision. You make the decision. So I had to do all this research and make sure I knew what my boundaries were, what I wanted out of this experience. Because I wasn't going to be able to say this is anybody else's fault. This is all me.
It's so interesting, Brandon. I had a mentor of mine tell me, because I studied broadcast journalism as well back in college at ASU. And he told me, he said, buddy, he's from Texas. He's like, buddy, one thing you need to learn how to do in your life is make your own decisions. And he said that to me, I think I was maybe like 21 or 22. And it really resonated, because as you move through your adult life, you call the shots and you make the decisions. And if you don't learn how to do it yourself, I don't really know where you end up. You kind of end up in this limbo area. So I think that's really great that your parents are like, you need to learn how to make your own decisions, even if it goes against what they wanted for you. You leave, you go to the NFL. You tell your parents, hey, mom and dad, I'm definitely going to go back and get my degree. You do that in 2018. You graduated from the University of Illinois years later. And in an article that the university wrote, I found this to be so fascinating. They quoted you saying, when I retired from the NFL, people would say, you don't need a degree. You are you. You don't need that. When you hear that now, like, what does that bring up for you? And what advice would you give to other, student athletes in that position?
Mm, the it brings a tear to my eye, just because of you know, the accountability aspect. That's what I promised my parents when I was 18 years old, was that I was going to get that degree. And my dad was right. All of those, all of the skills that I built along the way of holding myself accountable and getting that degree, it was so rewarding. It was rewarding, one, going back with all this like life experience as a 34-year-old student, going back, and I had to take some one-on-one classes again. I had to take anthropology 101. I had to retake Spanish. I took 3 levels of Spanish. And I had to take biology 101, right? And so just going in there with a mature mindset, and it just made me such a better student. And I was so much more equipped to critically think, to comprehend the concepts. I was a way better reader. I was able to communicate and write and formulate my thoughts, and it was just it's such a fantastic experience and rewarding experience to go back into academia. And so I think that as a young person, if anybody is in this situation where they can go, regardless if they're an athlete or not, if someone's putting $1 million in your face and saying, come earn it, go do that. Right? If someone's, if there's a job opportunity or a situation where someone's offering you an opportunity to go make money in the real world, leave school and go do that. Why? Because you can always go back later. You can always go back. And when you go back, you're going to be so much more valuable to the education system, in the classroom, and the information is going to be so much more pertinent to you. It was so much more usable when I was taking political science, in 2016 during the elections, and understand the difference between the parliamentary system and the presidential system, and just applying this information in real time. It was just such a great experience. So much so that at the onset of the pandemic, I enrolled into an MBA program. And it just like took it to a whole nother next level. And I just feel like everyone should go get an MBA.
The best part about this, Brandon, is just seeing the excitement, in your eyes and your face from, kind of this journey that you've taken so far. And you're so right. I always joked around with friends. I'm like, I'd love to go back to school because of all the knowledge now. I feel like I'd be a much better student. I'd be more focused. I'd be more dialed in, because back when you're 19, 20 years old, why am I taking philosophy 101? I don't need this. And you maybe just, and I'm not saying this is a blanket statement for all, but you kind of you get by. Like, that was my mentality in classes that had nothing to do with being a television anchor. And looking back, I'm like, you know what? It would be cool to go back to school. You get to learn more and you get to take all that knowledge.